science, the supernatural, biblical prophecy, global events that threaten to rattle the very foundation of human existence. Critical examinations of the most important issues facing today's modern world. Welcome to the Sharpening Report. And now, your host, Josh Peck.
Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck. Tonight we have a very special returning guest with us, Parker J. Cole, to talk to us about the rise of Christian speculative fiction. If you're a regular viewer of the show, you'll remember Parker from quite some time ago when we discussed the Christian romance genre. Yes, that actually is a genre, and the benefits of traditional and self-publishing. Now, if this is your first time to the Sharpening Report, welcome. Glad you're joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to get access to all past episodes of the Sharpening Report, plus new ones done about every week or so. You'll also find a lot of other videos on my channel relating to end times, prophecy, the Bible, quantum physics, geopolitics, and many other informative and fascinating topics. For those who prefer the audio-only podcast version, we do still offer that through Blog Talk Radio and iTunes. You can go to sharpeningreport.com for more information. Also, if you are listening to this on the podcast, all of our podcast episodes are actually audio taken from video interviews. So if you would like to watch the full video interviews, subscribe to youtube.com/JoshPeckDisclosure for full access to every episode of the Sharpening Report and more. So without further ado, all that being said, I'd love to welcome Parker J. Cole back to the Sharpening Report. Parker, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Josh. Thank you so much for having me again.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for making the time to do this. I know it was kind of short notice. We, for the audience, we actually just pretty much planned this yesterday. But it's a show that we've been talking about doing for a few months now.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, it's been a while. So I'm really glad that we're able to do this. For those who didn't catch the first episode and who might not be familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Parker J. Cole. I am a writer as well as the owner of the new PJC Media Online Broadcasting Network. I just started that this year, so I'm really excited about that. My fictional works include edgy Christian romances and some speculative fiction as well. So that's me in a nutshell. But if you really want to know who I am, I'm just simply a Mountain Dew lover and a marshmallow addict who writes to fill the void the sugar left behind. That's what it really is all about.
That's probably the best answer I've ever gotten to that question.
And tell the truth. My mom would say, tell the truth, shame the devil. That's what my mom would say all the time.
Amen. And also for the audience, if you're unfamiliar with Parker's work, I have 3 of her books behind me there. And it wasn't even awkward for me to put romance books or Christian romance or whatever behind me here because you're a good writer and it's great work. So
Thank you.
I suggest those to the audience. So what's your writing career looking like now?
You know, Josh, I was thinking as we was getting ready to talk how things have changed since we first connected with each other. You know, you were such a great connection. We really connected together when we first met. It doesn't really happen that often via online, but I'm really glad to see you grow and to see myself growing along with you. It's been really good. And so since then, like I said, my writing career has grown. I have more works out there, predominantly romantic works because I love romance, but I'm now starting to branch off into speculative fiction. And with that, I'm learning that speculative fiction takes different writing muscles to use, but it's a great genre to work in, especially Christian speculative fiction, which is on the rise. We talk about that a little bit later on in the broadcast. And so my writing career has, I think it's gotten better because now I'm writing as a seasoned writer. I wouldn't say I'm an expert yet, but I'm a seasoned writer now. And so I'm able to see things differently. I can look back at my older works and go, okay, I can do something better with that. But with each book that a person writes, you get better at it. You learn, or you should get better at it. You learn how to take criticism better. You learn how to take negative reviews better. You learn how to network better. So my writing career is in a state of improvement.
That's fantastic. What else? How have other things changed since the last time you've been on? Is there anything major beyond the writing career, or What else you got?
Well, what happened, like I said earlier, I am the owner of PJC Media Broadcasting Network, and that just happened this year. I was with another network for some time, and then I decided to branch off on my own and create my own network. So now I have a show that works under the PJC Media Network, and that show is called Dovetails. A lovely lady named Deborah Lassiter, who's also an author, but her show primarily deals with testimonials about how the Holy Spirit works in people's lives, and she also focuses on random acts of kindness through her show. And she's the first one. I'm looking forward to at least two more people coming on under the PJC Media brand. And it's so interesting because when I wanted to be a writer, when I first started, all I wanted the Lord was to do was make me a writer. Right? But the Lord takes us to different places that we never thought we'd be at. And I never saw myself here with the owner of my own pub broadcasting company, especially online. I never saw myself there. And since then, I have become a speaker. I'm actually doing a speaking engagement later on this year in July. And then I was asked to speak at another conference last year. I've done a few workshops. So my speaking engagements are increasing as well. So it's really exciting to see where my career is going. And I love it because we say, God, if you just give me this, I'll be happy. He says, why don't you let me take care of it and I'll tell you where to go. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm just along for the ride. You take control of this ship. I'm along for the ride. You're Captain Kirk. I'm Scotty. I'm just in the engineer room trying to make this stuff work. So I'm really excited where the Lord's going to take me.
I'm excited too. I'm really impressed with how you've grown in your career as well, and that's why I like doing these shows, because every once in a while I do get an email or a question about some people say that they feel led to write and they want to know how to get started. They want to know about basically the whole publishing industry, which you can't answer in a single email because it's right. It's learned through experience, but it's also learned through other. People like you and I talking on a show like this.
Exactly.
And yeah. So I mean that's cool too. And that's why I love giving a platform to these topics. What are some things that you're noticing about the Christian publishing industry?
Well, the Christian publishing industry in general is now starting to expand more. They're starting to take different, diverse ethnic groups. This was a huge deal. And a lot of people don't understand, especially if you're not in the industry, you don't understand how much of a huge deal it is to have ethnic characters represented in Christian mainstream publishing. It's still hard because a lot of the Christian publishers say, well, we can't market it. Well, if you don't try to market it, how can you market it if you don't even try? And so what's happening is that a lot of the bigger publishing houses are actually contracting. And we could talk about that a little bit later. They're actually contracting and getting rid of their fictional arms of their publishing company, and then they're going more nonfiction. But I'm going to tell you what I think is going on with that too a little bit later on. And then the publishing industry, because of this contraction, smaller presses are taking on those edgier Christian stories and publishing them. And there is a definite cry for people who want more realistic fiction. And like I said when I was on the show before, Amish romances are fine, sweet romances are fine, but there are people looking to be stimulated in their fiction. They're looking to have real characters that they can relate to. I cannot relate to an Amish woman. I cannot. I like to turn on the light. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's funny to anybody who's Amish, possibly right, looking at this, possibly.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
I doubt it too, but just in case. But I like, I can't relate to that. But it's a huge genre. People buy it all the time, and people think that's Christian fiction. One of the things that has happened, Josh, as I've gotten my broadcasting company, as I've expanded, I want people to know just because you hear Christian fiction, it does not mean you know what it's about. And Christian fiction has a wide variety and diverse tales to tell. And so that is one of my goals as an author and as a podcast host and radio host, is to let you know, just because you hear Christian fiction, you do not know what it's about. You're not going to just assume it's Amish. You're not going to just assume it's the Lord is central to that story. There may be Christian themes, but doesn't mean that he's central to the story. And there are other ways to do that. So I'm going to explore that as well. So that's one thing I see is happening in the Christian market, is that they are starting to expand. Edgier tales are becoming edgier, but there is also concern too, and I'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay. Yeah, and I was actually surprised because we do, I posted I posted a thing in the Sharpening Report Facebook group about this interview to give people the chance to send in viewer questions, which, again, we only had a day notice, so but there was one that was sent in. But we'll get to that later. But the reason I bring that up is because in the post I used the words Christian speculative fiction, and a lot of people didn't really know what that meant, and I think some people assumed that we were talking about speculative prophecy, or how, because usually with the audience of this show, a lot of them are that. But
Yeah.
what's great about this show is we cover everything.
Yes.
It's the sharpening report. It's not the prophecy report, right?
Exactly.
So we do a lot of different things. So just so everybody's on the same page, what in particular is Christian speculative fiction?
Well, let me take it into two parts. Speculative fiction in general are telling fantastical stories. So you can have science fiction stories, horror stories, you can have fantasy stories. And then there are subgenres under that. I know some Christian authors who write diesel punk, steampunk. I know some who write dragon stories, some who write near future science fiction, apocalyptic science fiction, just all kind of genres that fall under speculative fiction. Speculative fiction, if you want to put it in a nutshell, is the what if stories. So in the case, what if a radioactive spider bit someone and they became a superhero? That's the what if. Or conversely, what if a artificial intelligence was programmed to become a cyborg to go back into the future to kill off the woman who would try to kill him in the future? Those are the what if stories, and they're absolutely fantastical, and we love those kind of stories. Those are what if. So Christian speculative fiction falls under this umbrella of what if, but it's how they take different parts of those tales and tell it. Sometimes they may use a more overt style, having the Lord be a center part of the story, maybe even Christ coming in some way into the story, or maybe be more subtle. They may be discussing themes, like themes of identity, themes of God's love, forgiveness, but in fantastical ways. So that, in a nutshell, is what Christian speculative fiction is.
That makes a lot of sense, and we have, we've had a couple authors on here. Brian Godawa we had on recently, and he writes some really, really excellent fiction. And there are others out there. I know Derek and Sharon Gilbert have done things like that. Now, how has this actually been on the rise?
What's happening is that, as I alluded to earlier, is that people are looking for more realistic stories. And to be honest with you, with the way things are in the world right now, everything's coming together to a point. I mean, your show focuses on this a lot. It's coming to a point. And what's happening is that people want to get away from that. When problems start to come, they want to get away from it, okay? And so what's happening, I think, is with the rise of popular culture, like the superhero stories, the Transcendence, which I absolutely loved, all those kind of movies are reflecting that, the need for pop culture. And the pop culture is dictating the culture, if I can say it that way. And we're more focused on feelings and emotions and pleasure, stuff like that. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's rising, because we want to get away from our problems. And usually when things are going wrong, people want to get away from them and they want to escape. That's through fiction. Some people escape through romantic fiction, which is I write, and some people escape through speculative fiction, which is what I'm also branching off into. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's rising, because there's this subtle things are coming to a head, and let's just escape and get away from it. I really think that's one of the biggest reasons. Another thing is because people want more realistic fiction, and they don't want to assume that if I want to write a Christian science fiction story, I can write that and still be God honoring. And that's, for some people, they think you can't write Christian sci-fi and science fiction and Christian, and you can't. I'm actually working on one right now that you can do that. Another gentleman I know, he thought you can't have Christian horror. And when people hear Christian horror, they go, "Oh, what are you talking about?" I said, wait a minute. First of all, calm down. There's a caveat to that. We're not talking gore like the Saw, which is all about cutting people up and all that nasty stuff. We're not talking about that. We're using horror as understanding what the human condition actually is, which is depraved at its best. And using that and somehow finding God's love in the midst of all that. That's kind of what I think Christian horror is. It can vary a little bit depending on the author. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's rising, because people are looking to escape. People want more realistic fiction, and things are coming to a head that kind of brings that to a point too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's probably why a lot more are looking for different movies and TV shows and stuff like that fall along those. How does this differ from what the mainstream Christian publishing will put out? How does it differ from that?
Well, Christian speculative fiction, especially edgy, they explore taboo topics that the mainstream won't do. For example, a lot of people have problems with artificial intelligence, okay? And some Christian stories will explore that. One of the things, if you notice with artificial intelligence in the Eastern philosophy, is that it's more widely accepted. It's okay because they have a philosophy about the nature of life. It's all the same. Everyone has context. It's all equal. But with a Western philosophy, which is sort of undercurrent by Christian ideas, artificial intelligence is evil. Okay. And how do we depict it? If you look at how you depict the movie in the Eastern philosophy with artificial intelligence, with Western philosophy, you see two different viewpoints: the good artificial intelligence, the bad artificial intelligence. That's just an example of how it's different. That's a taboo topic. And so some mainstream publishers won't even explore that. And then let's look at the vampire stuff. There's a short story out right now called The Christian and the Vampire. And there's another story out there called Blood for Blood, which I read. And they're both talking to these undead creatures about Christ. Okay. In Blood for Blood, which I was absolutely phenomenal. In Blood for Blood, this vampire gets saved. Okay. And you're like, how does he get saved? I mean, it's just so fantastical. And the way the author wove into how his immortality was a curse because he lost his soul. And then in one part of the story, the vampire is reading Psalms 23, and the Bible says, "He restores my soul." And the vampire looks at the guy who's telling him this and said, "Was King David a vampire?" And so the guy's like, "No, but maybe we don't know. Maybe he was. He just calling around." But it's using this fantastical story of a vampire who gets saved, and then it asks you this question: is there any heart too dark for God's love to pierce? Is there any human heart? And so we use those type of stories to bring about that message. I think I got lost in the question, Josh, but I hope that answers it. This showing how different speculative fiction tales can be more taboo for the mainstream than for what edgy Christian speculative fiction does. And I could show many more examples of using these fantastical elements and showing God's love or God's themes or Christian themes all in them.
Well, sure, yeah, and that'd be a good idea to get into that too, because I know before the show you talked to me a little bit about this, and which is really interesting. What are some books and stories that you could give us to showcase Christian speculative fiction?
Okay, my first book I want to talk about is a fantastic story called The Kadesh Chronicles, a series called The Kadesh Chronicles, and it's called Fool's Errand. What makes this taboo for the mainstream fiction publishing arena is that the author played around with an idea that what if some angels who left heaven but didn't side off with Lucifer, or if they sided with Lucifer or Satan, they wanted to be restored back to the Lord. Mind you, it's in a gray area. The author himself makes very clear that he's not holding it as truth. It's just an idea that he used, and he actually talked to people before he did it. His name is David G. Johnson. And in the story, the angels go to the Lord, and the Lord creates a planet called Kadesh. He creates this planet, and based off how these angels perform with the beings there, gives them the opportunity to be restored back to heaven. That's all I'm going to say about it, because it's a fantastic story. Anyone who reads is going to love it. But if you just read the prologue, it just sends chills down your spine because it's so fantastical. And
also, just because I know what some of my audience might be thinking, we're not reading these things to get theology or
no. I hope our audience doesn't think that. These are just fictional stories. But he used that to show some information there, just to show certain things, and then to make sure that it was still God-centered. The Lord the Lord created man on that other planet, and there's a parallel between Earth and Kadesh. So, like when Earth starts, I forgot what year it was. So Earth starts here, then Kadesh life begins 1. So it's very fantastic. Again, it's just a story. I don't want people to get freaked out by it or anything like that. Another story that I absolutely loved was a story called The Third Heaven. The Third Heaven is written by a friend of mine. His name is Donovan Neal. In this story, he is coming from the viewpoint of Lucifer before the fall. So he's in heaven. He's right in heaven. I promise you, it's not the Bible, but sometimes it's so well written. You're like, this could possibly have happened. Mind you, it's just fiction. He's not saying that, but he really had to go to another place to get there. And so in The Third Heaven, he's exploring Lucifer before the fall and how that happened, because he told me, what would happen what was Lucifer possibly thinking that he would think he would overthrow God? That was the what if question of speculative fiction. What was he thinking to get that way? And so that's his book. Another book actually is called this one is like more of a horror story. This one called The Age of Apollyon. Now, your listeners might be a little thrilled about this one because he takes a very different viewpoint of end times. Okay. What he did is that he has Satan manifested onto the earth. And when Satan manifested onto earth, questions of whether or not God existed were done because he exists. Because if the devil exists, then God has to exist. And so the majority of the people became Satanist. Okay. Now, some became Satanists more so as a cultural thing, and some became really true Satanists. They were worshiping Satan. And then he desecrated, and you read the book, it's a beautiful desecration of everything Christian, and in the fact that in this worldview, it's very desecrated, stuff like that. But then he uses his main character, who's Satanist, and he brings him to Christ. But it's through these horrific things that happen. And it's a wonderful book. His name's Mark Carver. It's The Age of Apollyon. It's a 3-book series. There's a few more if you want me to go through them right now, just to show people this diversity of Christian speculative fiction. The other one is actually a post-future story of when atheism becomes the main religion in the culture. It's called The Good Atheist. The name of the book is called The Good Atheist. And in The Good Atheist, this particular writer named Michael Mantle, he's using the idea of what I think Christopher Hitchens said, that you should kill anyone who, and I may be saying it wrong, Josh, so you should kill anyone who believes in religion. And so what happens is that this atheistic world takes over everything. So everyone's an atheist. Okay. And anyone who's not an atheist is a heretic. And so this guy, he's a good atheist, and he has a wife, and he has these good morals, which the writer told me that he wanted to make sure people understood just because someone's an atheist doesn't mean that they're evil people. They just misguided. And so he uses good atheist to show how he goes from being an atheist to being a Christian believer. And so that's just one idea of speculative fiction. Now his is more so apologetic. So he gets more into the apologetics of it. So he uses a lot of intelligent design theories, stuff like that. What was another one, Josh? I sent so many of them to you because I just wanted to give my authors a chance to, your listeners, to just check them out. The creme de la creme one, and they're all good, so it's hard to say that. The Windows of Heaven. If you want a book, and I've been telling you this, Josh, to read this book for a while, The Windows of Heaven by K.G. Powderly. He goes from before Noah was called before God to the Tower of Babel. Everything your show embodies is in this set of books, okay? We are talking like, he actually went with if you're a young earth creationist, if you're an old earth creationist, if you're a progressive creationist, and if you're ruin restoration side, all those aspects are included in this story. And then he gives this plausible idea of how the world would have been before the fall, before the flood. Okay. It's after the fall, before the flood. There's a scene in there where Noah's trying to get his friend from going into the Garden of Eden. Okay. And the cherubim is there, and this fantastical scene where the cherubim protects anyone from going into the garden. And I was told, KG, I said, oh my gosh, the imagery in this story is fantastic. I almost think this is not the Bible, but it's like, this is what happened between the verses, you know? So those are those fantastical stories that Christians have written in the speculative genre. I know I took a little bit of time there, Josh, but it's some more I sent to you, but I can't remember what they all are. But those are just some really good ones that I hope our listeners will check out.
Yeah, definitely. And again, just for the audience, that's the main difference between fiction and nonfiction is fiction, we go into it knowing this isn't theology, this isn't,
yes.
But like you said, it's what if, or,
Mm-hmm.
not nonfiction is where that's where you're going to get more commentary
on
the Bible. And yeah,
you should be, because you don't want to just believe what everyone's saying. One of the supporters in the post was like, it's interesting to see what people say and compare it to the Bible. You definitely should. Most of these fictional works are fiction. Some of them are based in very good research, like the one Windows of Heaven. He spent 30 years researching that. And he actually had me convinced about the idea of Noah, saying that maybe Noah was chosen, not necessarily because of his moral attitude, but because he wasn't oh Josh, it's on the tip of my tongue, didn't have any DNA.
From the Nephilim. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's what.
Yeah, well, and that's awesome, because that's actually right in the Hebrew, the when it says he's perfect in his own generations. That Hebrew word is, if I remember right, tamim, which can have the idea of being genetically
Yes.
pure.
And
Yeah.
that, and he actually, the way he postulated this idea, it was completely plausible. Mind you, though, it's in the vehicle of fiction, okay? And then at the end, when he does, because it's 5 books, when he did the Flood book, he used several creation models to determine how the flood would have acted. He went to the Nephilim. I always say the word wrong. Nephilim. He went to ancient gods and the chimeras, all that kind of stuff that your show really talks about. All of that is in this book. So if your listeners are listening and they say, I'm not interested in other books you said, you got to read The Windows of Heaven, okay? It just really meshes with everything that you talk about, Josh.
That's really cool. Yeah, that one sounds good. And as soon as I have time to actually do it, I do want to read that book. If he ever makes a movie, I'll probably be more likely to watch that first.
Yeah, I hope so. It was much better than Noah. It was so much better than Noah.
Yeah, that was the Darren Aronofsky film. That was a mess.
Yeah, because his book is it shows Noah growing in grace. It doesn't show him as perfect because he had all kind of issues, and it shows him growing in grace. And then each subsequent story follows his son. So his son's story, and then his other son, and then the other son, and then the 5th book is about Tower of Babel, which is I think several generations after the earth is populated again after the flood. And this is how racism came to be. All the other kind of stuff came from Tower of Babel, and so he explores his context in his series. So. Like I said, there's more I could use. I can't remember who they all are now. I sent all those pictures to you, Josh, and I can't remember which ones they all are. But Third Heaven, Lucifer, atheistic, apologetic would be the Good Atheist. Fantasy would be the Kadesh Chronicles, starting with Fool's Errand, and then biblical history, fantasy history would be the Windows of Heaven series, and then the horror one was Age of Apollyon with Mark Carver. That was the one that has a very unique take on the end times because it's like a stop before the actual end times, actually. But I think any of your listeners will like it. The graphics, they're not very graphic at all. Except for maybe Apollyon because he's dealing with dark stuff, but it's not graphic. Like there's not a lot of explicit stuff in there. A little edgy, but not explicit.
Awesome. So if like I said before, sometimes I'll get emails or messages from people asking how to get started and all this. If somebody's watching this and thinking, if I want to write, what should I consider? How do they make that decision?
It really depends on what a person's interests are. Like your interests, obviously, Josh, goes to what your show is about. So if you're going to write something fiction, more than likely you're going to write what's already in your interest. Okay. For me, I grew up with Stephen King. I used to read Stephen King, sneak and read them until my mom took them from me. I used to read Stephen King, and then I used to read romance. And so my natural tendency is romance and horror sometimes, and some speculative fiction. And then I grew up with Star Trek. I grew up with all kinds of speculative fiction stories. So that's my general interest. What interests you? What is it that gets your gears going? Stuff like that. And then, what do you like to read? Maybe you may like to listen to this type of stuff like you talk about, Josh, but you may like to read romance. Go ahead and write romance if you want to write romance. So if you want to write, like I said, fantasy stories, go ahead and write that. What generally interests you? What naturally interests you? Because if it interests you, then you have a bigger chance of completing it. So that's where I would start off at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I got to say, I have a great respect for anybody who can write fiction and write it well. I tried once, and it was a disaster. I will probably never do it again because it is hard. Because not only do you have to do all the research like you would for a nonfiction book, but you have to create characters, and you have to keep the story interesting. You got to give them. It's a whole other monster that it's
Yes.
incredible. So I have a lot of respect for people like you and others out there who can actually write this stuff and do it well. Now you have a show. How does your show promote Christian speculative fiction?
Well, because Christian speculative fiction was the redheaded stepchild in the industry, I made sure that anyone who came into my show would know that I would support them. And as it rises, that following is growing because I showcase Christian authors worldwide. I've had them in China. I've had them in New Zealand. I've had them Australia. I've had them different places, okay? But with Christian speculative fiction, I let them know that I am there for them. I will help support you. One guy, he's coming on, he's doing about satanic possession and stuff like that. So I support those ideas. But at the same time, I'm not going crazy. I don't want nothing that interferes with the Bible, nothing that makes God less than what he is. I don't do that. So I kind of make that known right away. I don't always get a chance to read every book I have on my shelf, but I do try to let them know, hey, this is a Christian show. This is what we kind of believe. This is what we're doing, just to let you know. 'Cause I know the Christian world is so divided. You got to just, let's get to the core points. So stuff you got to get to the core points. And so I let them know that. And then I also host them on my blog as well and my social media.
Fantastic. If people want to get more information about Christian speculative fiction or any of the things that we're talking about, what are some websites that they could go to?
Well, I wanted to just bring your listeners' attention to 3 websites and 3 people I've connected with. One is a edgy Christian speculative fiction publisher. The name of that publisher is called the Crossover Alliance, and they produced some of Mark Carver's book. The guy I told you wrote The Age of Apollyon. They produced some of his books, and they write edgy Christian speculative fiction. A little bit edgier because it may have some sexual situations in it, not necessarily explicit, but just implied stuff like that. And then they have some violence, stuff like that, because in the real world that happens. So it's okay for them to kind of have that in their stories, but they always read everything to make sure it's God-centered, God-driven, things of that nature. And so that's one site. It's called the Crossover Alliance. I'm actually working with them, with some of their authors, to be on the show. And I've read the owner's books, and they're fantastic books as well. The other place you want to go to is a blog called Speculative Faith. And Speculative Faith, I've also met the administrator of that blog and their various writers, and they also talk about speculative fiction. And it is their goal to have every Christian speculative fiction novel in their library. And they talk about all aspects of speculative fiction and speculative faith. They also talk about how they connect. For example, just to show you, like one of the articles, one of the authors mentioned about how death is being taken out of the picture with a lot of sci-fi movies and superhero movies. But death is a reality. And what's happening, and I couldn't help but think about Revelations when I was listening to it, they're going to say, fall on us, kill us, and death will escape them. And here we are trying to, it's funny. And so they talk about a lot of things about storytelling, speculative fiction. They review movies, books, everything speculative fiction they review. And they always center it to the Lord. And that's speculative faith. And then for our listeners who want to enjoy speculative fiction stories, I invite you to go to the Untold Podcast, which is literally untoldpodcast.com. They have a lot of stories from a fantasy, sci-fi, horror, all kind of stories from a Christian speculative point of view. I just recently heard another horror story by an author named Jess Hannah, and it was absolutely fantastic, terrified me. It was great. It was thrilling, and it was all God-centered. And so you definitely want to go to the Untold Podcast. And a lot of people hear these things, they have a knee-jerk reaction to it without exploring it. And so I wouldn't tell you anything that I would not benefit the Lord. I would never tell anyone that. So definitely explore those 3. You want the Crossover Alliance publisher. You want speculativefaith.com and the untoldpodcast.com. Those are some places you can go to get more speculative fiction, learn more about it, storytelling arts, connect with great people, because these are all Christians who definitely want to serve the Lord in the kingdom the way he has given them the gifts to do that.
Fantastic. Are there any things that people should stay away from when it comes to Christian speculative fiction writing?
Anything that is debasing to the Lord, I would stay away from, because it could be someone masquerading as Christian. Because people can talk Christianese. They can talk Christianese. They don't have to be a Christian. So if you start to feel uncomfortable as you're reading the story, and I'm not talking about uncomfortable because it's out of your comfort zone. I mean, you're sensing something is wrong with this story. Like they're making God weak, or they're doing something to, stay away from that, because some things can slide in. But generally, Christian speculative fiction is uplifting to the Lord. It is God-centered. Some authors do have more explicitness than some other Christian authors. It's basically a personal preference. Like I can handle certain things that don't bother me. Some people, what is made mundane for me may be obscene for others. So some of it is preference. But if you start to read something and you're like, this doesn't sound right, or they're making God different, or they're trying to demise some kind of faith, I will be careful of that. But the ones I've come across have always been God-centered, God-driven, God-purposed, everything under that umbrella.
That makes a lot of sense. How does this differ from what secular publishers put out there?
Well, they're often very critical of God. They make man to be God. They're often very critical. In fact, the gentleman from the Untold podcast, he said, I used to listen to a lot of spec fiction podcasts, but they were so demeaning to the Christian faith. He said, not other faiths, but to the Christian faith in particular, they were extremely demeaning, critical, blasphemous. And he was like, they have great stories, but they were so mean. So the Lord, he's a pastor too. The Lord led him to create the Untold podcast, which has God honoring speculative fiction stories. And secular fiction doesn't do that. And I like the superhero movies like anybody else. But if you ever notice, the superhero movies are trying to make man into God. It's saying that if we just understand ourselves better, we'll become gods. If we just understand this more, we don't need the need for God. We keep trying to throw God out the window. And that's what a lot of secular speculative fiction does. Some of it can be clean and uplifting, but generally it's more man focused. A lot of secular speculative fiction is man focused on their own efforts, on their own power, on their own grace, or some kind of scientific procedure that makes them immortal or something like that. A lot of it is not God-centered. Christian speculative fiction is God-centered. Whether subtle or overt, it is God-centered.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it is time for viewer questions, but again, we did only get one. However, the one that we did get, I want you to take as much time as you want to expound on, because I think this is extremely important. For the audience at home, if you would like the chance to send in viewer questions to future guests, you can do so at the Sharpening Report Facebook group. You can search for it on Facebook, or you can go to sharpeningreport.com and find a direct link there. Every time we do one of these, I'll try to give more than a day's notice, but I will pin a post that says who the guest is, what the show is going to be about, and give you the chance to comment and leave questions for the guest. I've never had a guest turn this down, so we're just going to keep doing it. Okay, we did get one question, and again, I think this is extremely important, and surprisingly, we haven't gone through it yet in this show.
Okay.
So Carol asks, Parker, who is your target audience, and what topics do your books discuss? So I want to give you the chance to give us all the information on your books. I have 3 of them displayed here, but I think you have more out there than just that. Tell us everything.
Well, with my books, you have to understand something, and I have to go back before I started writing. I had no idea there was a Christian publishing industry when I was growing up, because I always read secular books, but my faith was never affected by it, because I know fiction is just fiction. You can write anything. That's why I wasn't in an uproar about Dan Brown's books. So it was like everyone kept getting an uproar. I was like, it's not true. Calm down. And it doesn't matter what he said is true. Calm down. It's not true. But when I first started writing my first book, it's called Dark Cherub. You can see it behind Josh. That did not start off as a Christian horror story. That was just going to be a horror story. It was based off an experience I had experienced when I was 18 years old with a friend of mine. And it really affected me to the point where I had to write a story. And then over the past 10 years, when I was writing that story, it changed. And it grew to become a God-honoring story. And I think it has done it. It was my first book. And what's so special about Dark Cherub, I call all my books my children. What's so special about Dark Cherub is that I had lost my job back in 2010. And it had been sitting on my computer for 10 years. And I looked at it and said, you are not going to sit on this computer anymore. I am going to get you published. And the next year I published it. And then I had it republished again. And that was Dark Cherub. And I love that book. It was my very first one. I've learned a lot since then, too, like you do with every child that you have. The second book is my romance book, Christian romance, called Many Strange Women. My romances tend to hit issues that the mainstream Christian publishing industry won't hit on. And I tend to have multicultural characters in my story because it's the way the world looks. There's a lot of different people out there. And plus, with me being in a mixed ethnic marriage, too, I wanted to show that, too. So most of my characters generally have a love interest of a different ethnic group. That's just something that's dear to me. It doesn't always have to be that way, but once in a while, I may have something different. And I touch on issues that a lot of people don't talk on. With Many Strange Women, that book surprised me. I had no expectations. And it was my bestseller. Sold thousands of copies, and lots of good people enjoyed it. I'll never forget when I read one reviewer's comment. They said, had I known this was a Christian book, I would have never read it. But they said, because I read it, I enjoyed it, I would give this author a chance. And that's what any author wants. And that book also touches on something very personal to me when I used to hate myself quite often. I used to have a huge self-hatred of myself. And over time, the Lord has helped me with that. I thought I wasn't pretty enough. I don't look like her. I don't have her outfit. I don't have her hair. I don't. And the Lord has helped me get over that self-hatred of myself. So that character in that story experiences a lot of self-hatred to the point where she hides behind it. And then my other character, the male character, he has a very checkered past that he's trying to escape from. And so to escape from it, he says, God, if you give me an ugly woman to be my wife, I'll marry her and I'll do right by you. That's the premise of the story. So he meets this woman and he doesn't find her attractive by any means. And she just wants a husband. So they marry. And so that's how the story starts with that one. The second book surprised me. It's called The Other Man. And that deals with a topic a lot of Christians don't want to talk about. We just talk about adultery and talking about how do you get there? Will you do it? That kind of things, because sometimes we may think about it, but we won't do it. But there's some Christians have. And I think that book touches on that. So my romances tend to touch on tough topics within the framework of a love story between these two characters. That book is a little, I like it a lot, actually, because I touch on a lot of different things in there. And then it's not pictured behind Josh, but my third book's coming out May 31st. It's coming out May 31st, and that's called Vengeful Vows. And basically, it deals with, the tagline is, Hell hath no fury like an ex-lover scorned. And it's the third in the series. So that deals a lot with trying to control things and how much control do we really have. That has a lot to do with that, too. And so those books kind of culminate my major works. And then I did a short story. The short story was a speculative fiction story, Josh, and it's kind of like a space opera, and it's called God Forsaken. And the book it's a short story that takes place on the planet with no sun or moon. It just kind of drifts in space, and they're all prisoners on this planet called God Forsaken because the only one in the Milky Way planetary alliance with no sun or moon. And so they send the prisoners there. And so the question is, do we matter on this planet? Are we God Forsaken, or do we matter? That kind of explores that question there. And that was my very first speculative fiction one, where I was kind of into sci-fi and horror and love all in one story. So that one, Josh, is actually part of a distributed anthology called The Realms of Our Own. We're all Christian speculative fiction writers. And what we did, we created like a multiverse. The multiverse is through the characters, not through the setting. So my character in that story is the warden of a penal colony called God Forsaken. But in another author's story, she is the underground club owner on this another planet, and another one, she's an assassin. And so that's like the multiverse. It was a fun project. If your listeners are out there, they're all like 99 cents except for one of them. They're all 99 cents. You want to pick up a copy, bless the other authors who contributed to this anthology. I think you'll enjoy just a wide range of speculative fiction out there. I really think you will. And then my last one is a short story I did for charity. I had never did a charity anthology before. It's a short story, short romantic story, kind of comedic. And that's in a book called Birds of Passage. And it's all written by edgy Christian fiction writers, because you have to those who make those kind of decisions. You have two different writers, some who write edgy Christian fiction, some who write more mainstream Christian fiction. Both are valid. I would never sit here and say they're not valid. Both are valid, but I tend to write edgier because I like to touch topics that a lot of people want to talk about. And so I did go into fantasy too, Josh. My fantasy one is called The Druid Spear. Now that one it's not necessarily a Christian story because I wrote it with someone else, but it's not God, it's okay. It's more like a clean read. And it's the characters are Japanese. I really had fun with that story because I grew up watching anime, manga. I took Japanese for 4 years and I was in high school. I still watch it, things of that nature. So that was more of my love affair with Japanese fantasy. So that's called A Druid Spear, and I kind of go there. That's under a different name called Parker Payne. And just to let your listeners know, I called it is under the pen name of Parker Payne to honor my grandmother, because my grandmother taught me how to read and she taught me how to write, and she also was the first geek in our family. So she watched all the old 50s sci-fi movies. She watched all that kind of stuff. So she gave us that love of speculative fiction when we were younger. So that's why it's under Parker Payne and under that name. So those are all my works. That's what I write. I like to write different things. For my romance, I like to hit on tough topics in a love story that people don't want to talk about. I tend to hit on those tough topics, and I try to make them God-centering as possible.
That's awesome, and what I have read of yours is absolutely phenomenal, and I've loved every word. So I mean, I have no problem promoting your work on this show. So for the audience, check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. Actually, I'll take a viewer question. I say on here I am the host of the show, but a lot of times I'm learning right along with the audience, because it's the sharpening report. Iron sharpens
Exactly.
iron. And this is actually something I want to revisit, because I think both of us have probably learned a lot since the first time we talked about this. But what's the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing, and what are the benefits of each? I know you're more on the traditional publishing side, and I'm just now starting to get into that, but I've been self-published, for everything I've done, and I think there's probably benefits to both, but of course they're both a lot of work.
Exactly.
So what do you see as the benefits for traditional over self-publishing?
Well, I don't want to say there's any benefits over it. It's just there's benefits to it, just like there's benefits to indie publishing. And it's funny because you're starting to get into trade publishing or traditional publishing, and I'm starting to go into a little bit indie publishing. So it's just funny how that works out. But with traditional publishing is that you do have someone who takes the workload off of you. They help with your covers, editing. Well, they should. They should. And I have to be careful with people who try to take your money just to take your money. But most traditional publishers do not take any money from you. If they do, you should be very concerned about that, because they're not a traditional publisher. They're a vanity press, and vanity press takes money from you and say, we'll publish your book for you. Give us $2,000-$3,000. Okay. Just so your listeners will know. But traditional publisher, they do the covers for you. They do the editing for you. They help market for you. Now, with the way the publishing industry is, even that's changing, because authors have to build their own platforms. Like for your example, Josh, you built your platform with the sharpening. That's how you built your platform, and people follow you, and a publisher will be attracted to you because you already have a platform. See, back in the day, they would help build your platform for you. They would set up all the TV interviews, how you go different places. That's not happening anymore. You have to kind of build your own platform, unless you're Stephen King, unless you're a huge big wig author. Okay. So traditional publishers are not fighting, but having to adapt to the indie publishing movement, because now indie publishers do not need the validation of a traditional publishing company any longer. Because if you work very hard, Josh, guess what? You built your own following. When your books come out, they sell because people like what you write. And it took time to do that. And that's one of the benefits of indie publishing, is that you see the fruit of your own works. You get your profits, 100% of your profits. You don't have to share with anybody. You can develop your own timeline. You don't have to be on anyone else's timeline. And you work hard for yourself and see the benefit of that. For me, as a traditional published author, I don't mind having to share my profits. Some people are like, oh, what's wrong with you? It's not that. It's just not that. But I like having the help most of the time, because I'm very busy. I have a busy schedule, and I don't always have time to do certain things. Like I write, I do my shows, I do other things. So I'm busy. So with a traditional publisher, that may work better for me. And my publisher is actually absolutely fantastic. They're fantastic. They work with you, they help you, they grow with you, things of that nature. And so I have a really good a good publisher. Now, I'm also exploring other publishers too, which may give me a different experience, but we'll see what happens. So the benefits is that you have someone helping you with traditional publishing. They take on the brunt cost of it, which is why they split the royalties. They split, well, we took on this brunt cost of it, we'll split the royalties, or we give you an advance. Like some publishers give you an advance on royalties. Okay. Now, when Stephen King got his advance back in the day, I think it was $400,000 for Carrie. That's not going to happen for everybody. Okay. I wish it did, because then everybody would be a publisher. Everybody would be a writer. Okay. But some publishers do offer splits with the royalty. Like if they may offer 40%, then you get 60%, or vice versa, or something like that. With Christian publishers, they prefer to work with agents. So I have an agent who sells my work out to publishers. And the reason why is because they don't want to have the expense of dealing with newbie publishers. Because newbies, they're newbies. They have to really be dedicated to that. And so newbies have to be dedicated to it. Show me that you want me to publish your book. Push yourself. Give me a great manuscript. Even though they're going to edit, they still want a great manuscript. They don't want mess they have to fix up later. You know, they don't mind polishing it, but you should give them the best manuscript possible. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope.
Oh, with indie publishing, the brunt of that all falls on you. So you're responsible for your editing, you're responsible for your cover, you're responsible for your marketing, you're responsible for your distribution, you're responsible for your paperback. All that responsibility falls to you. But like I said earlier, it's rewarding to see the fruit of your labor. But it can be a lot of hard work, okay? And a lot of lonely nights. What I always tell indie publishers is to make sure you invest in a good cover artist and a good editor. I am tired of seeing indie authors with these really cruddy covers and this really cruddy editing. Stop. Don't get your coffee for 2 months. Don't go out to McDonald's for 2 months. Don't go to the movies for 2 months. Save the money and get a good cover artist. Back in the day, the adage, don't judge a book by its cover, used to work. That has been thrown into the bottom of the sea, never to return. The reason why is because the market is oversaturated with books, okay? Oversaturated. Your cover has to stand out. If it looks really cruddy, who wants to buy your book? It's like offering someone lasagna on a garbage can lid. No one wants to eat lasagna off a garbage can lid, okay? So that's one of the things I tell indie authors. Invest, if you're going to do an indie, then invest into a quality product. Make sure you put the best quality product out there. And a lot of people say, well, I'll just learn how to do it myself. Don't do it yourself. Unless you already have aptitude for it, don't do it yourself. I can't draw a straight line. There is no way I'm going to do my own covers. I don't even have the time for that type of thing. I don't want to do it. I will go ahead and invest a couple $100s into a good cover. Or if you're really good, you can do like pre-mades. And for indie authors who don't know this, they have pre-made sites where you can get a cover that's already pre-made. And what the artist will do is just change the title, maybe do a little font change. You get a pre-made cover. And those pre-made covers generally are one of a kind. And so no one else will get that cover. So if you want to do that too, they have some great pre-made sites you can look out there. Just look up pre-made covers on Google and you'll find it. That's advice I would give to indie publishers. So benefits, to wrap up the benefits, is that all the profits go to you. You set your own timetable. You deal your own projects out. You control everything. You're the business person of that business. You're entrepreneur, okay? With the traditional publishing, you do have to have the dictates of the publisher. If the publisher said have that manuscript to them by May 31st, have it to them on May 31st. They generally let you put input on your cover, but they'll decide what they want the cover to look like. So a lot of the control may be gone. But you also have that army, little small army working for you. If you have a smaller publisher, you tend to have greater freedom than with a larger publisher, okay? But there are benefits to that as well. So hopefully that helps our listeners. It really is a personal preference, what you want to do. I do not recommend vanity presses. Vanity presses will charge you $2,000 or $3,000 for you to publish your book. Something you could have done on your own. Probably at less half the cost. I used a vanity press for Dark Cherub first time, and it didn't really do anything. And I said, why did I do that? But at the time, I didn't know. I didn't know what I knew now. And if I go back, because I'm planning on doing some more with Dark Cherub, when I go back, I'll probably do something different and spend less money than what I did with a vanity press. I wouldn't recommend a vanity press. But those are my thoughts about the benefits of traditional publishing versus indie.
That's awesome. And yeah, I first off, I totally agree with you on the vanity press thing.
Yeah.
That is, it is borderline scam. It is,
yes.
It is ridiculous.
Yeah, I say borderline. I won't say because they have helped some people.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't knock that because I did get my book published, and I thank them for that. Okay, but then I didn't have to really spend $2,000 to do that.
Exactly, because like what I use, and this kind of goes with what you were saying about the covers and everything too. The covers are extremely important because yes, people are going to judge your book based on its cover. They absolutely will. And in a sense, they kind of should, because if they're going to
Yes.
be spending $20 on a book or even $10 on a book,
Hmm.
that's a lot of money for a lot of people right now. That's a big investment. They want to make sure that they're actually going to get some kind of return on that through knowledge or a good story or whatever the book's going to be. If the cover looks like if the cover didn't have as much time put into it, that what kind of message does that give to the.
Exactly. It's a reflection of the author. Although with my covers, it's a romantic cover, okay? And Dark Cherub is a scary cover, or it gives you that foreboding sense. You can at least get a sense what the book is about. If your book is about Miss Marple sells apple pies, then you don't want a picture of the alien on your cover, okay? You just don't, because so many people will be so disappointed when they read about Miss Marple and her apple pies. But then conversely, if you have a military story about a predator in the jungle, you don't want to put a picture of a fruitcake on it, because they're going to be misled by the picture of fruitcake. So your cover reflects the story inside of it. Now, some people have opted for, and this is very important, that's why I'm spending some time on here. Some people have opted to do their own covers, and they look kind of bland. They may be romantic, but they look kind of bland. Even that doesn't sell. You can have a very interesting title. If your cover looks bland, it probably won't sell. I know a lady was asking for some pulls for a cover she was doing, but my personal opinion, the covers look too like non-fictional books. They're romantic dramas, but they look like non-fiction books. And I said, I can't fill this cover because it looks like a non-fiction book to me, not a romantic book. And so those little nuances you want to take into consideration. That, and also really great blurb. I know you can talk about that too, Josh, with the blurb, because when you read Cherub and Chariots, you want to make sure it's about Cherub and Chariots, And I have a copy book. I just haven't read it yet. Not because I don't want to read it, but I'm writing, so it's like.
Hey, I understand that.
You know.
I don't feel as bad about not reading all of your stuff yet either.
Yeah.
So
It'll take. I wouldn't put romance on a man, Josh. Though I wouldn't put romance on a man unless he specifically asked me. There's 2 men so far in my acquaintance who have read my book, and they asked me for it. I did not give it to them. They were like, hey, I like to read your book. One guy, he admits he's a hopeless romantic, so he likes romance books, so he read it. Another guy just wanted to be supportive and read it and enjoyed it. So I think probably because I have a little bit of speculative in there too, but I won't go into that. But yeah, so those are that biggest thing to any authors out there. The first thing is to write your story. If it's a fictional story, write it. If it's a non-fictional treatise, write it. You cannot sell anything if you don't write it. Do not let fear stop you from writing it. Because one of the biggest things, the 5 biggest things that stop you from writing: life circumstances, fear of rejection, fear of ridicule, money, and I forgot what the 5th one was, but they all added up to fear. And guess what they all added up to? Me. They stopped themselves from writing. Why did it take 10 years for Dark Cherub to come to fruition? I had the story since I was 18. It took 10 years for it to come to fruition, So don't let fear stop you. Don't let yourself stop you. Don't worry about if it sounds right the first time. That's why you invest into a good editor. And that's even more important now, because now what happened, Josh, with the big five publishing companies, they made a deal with Amazon. And so now they brought those high-priced books from the big authors down cheaper. So guess what's happened with the indie authors? They just can't get by with cruddy work anymore. They have to have a quality work now, because I'm going to invest $5, which some people think is a lot of money, but if I'm going to invest $5 into your book, I want a quality product. And what was happening before, that indie authors were getting away with really cruddy work. And that's why people were thinking, well, you may be an indie author, but is your work good? Now you have to produce a quality work like you should have in the first place. So that's one thing I want to tell our listeners. If you want to write, get a good editor, get a good cover artist.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And if people are worried about the money, like you said, there are ways around it. Actually, my first book, which is right here. Oh, I'm gonna try to not knock your books down while I'm doing this.
It's okay.
My first book was Disclosure, and I didn't make this cover. This was actually from if you go to createspace.com. That's really good. I fully support and promote CreateSpace, because that's how I did all my stuff. And I mean, I don't get any money or anything for promoting it. I just really believe in what they're doing. You don't have to put up any money up front. They have this was actually, they have this cover creator thing where they you can use a picture that they have. So I put this together through that, but it didn't cost me anything to do. And it's a print on demand type of thing, and it works through Amazon, so your books will be on Amazon. But basically, so you don't have to put any upfront costs. You just write the book. You can make the cover art through there, or if you do have a good graphic artist, like I do now, my really good friend, you can upload your own. Like these two. These two, my friend, my graphic artist friend did, and
I know who did that too. I talked to him. They're gorgeous. Oh, her. I'm sorry. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous.
She did amazing work, and I have her contact information in the books if people are interested. But she does amazing work, and it's well worth the price. But with CreateSpace, you can upload, if you already have a cover, so that's good. But yeah, no upfront cost. What they do is every time they sell or you sell a book, they take a cut, but that's going to be whatever you're going to have to give some of your profits to somebody, whether you do self-publishing or traditional,
Exactly.
And for self-publishing out there are no better margins that I've been able to find. It's really good. The cost of the product, if you want to order in bulk, the cost of the product is extremely fair. Whatever. It's I usually pay about $3 or $4 per book if I order 200, I might be spending $600 or $800 or whatever, but if I turn around and sell those at a conference for
the full retail price, you can get a nice profit. And a lot of people don't see. A lot of people too nowadays, Josh, when it comes to authors and readers tend to expect something now. Back in the day when you were a reader, you didn't expect to get a free book. That didn't happen. But and I actually think that's just a problem with the indie authors, because they also, I shouldn't say a problem. Indie authors created that situation because they would give their books away for free because Amazon said, hey, try this author for free. And now everyone's expected to get a free book. I remember back in the day, please, there was no way you got a book for free. Please, okay. But now we got to adapt to the market, adapt to people. So with CreateSpace, if you want to, sometimes for authors who want to get more exposure, say, hey, I have a giveaway. I'm doing a giveaway in 10 days. Here's my book and get a free copy of it. It helps with exposure too. So Josh is telling you how to get it via CreateSpace. It's a wonderful program for new authors. Probably the best one out there, like you said, because Amazon is very aggressive with authors. They're very aggressive. They want you to come to them, and they constantly try to foresee what's going to be on the horizon before you even know it's on the horizon. Like with Kindle Unlimited, they now change it to where you have a service. You can get free books, but you're not really getting them for free because you pay every month for that service. And so authors now have an opportunity to get more of their books to people's viewpoints, and they get paid on people how much they read and stuff. But now we get into the minutia of the publishing industry. I don't want to make anyone confused. So but those are my thoughts about that.
Yeah, and one really important point that you brought up, and I'm glad that you did, is that whatever avenue you go down, it is hard work. It's worth it, and it's rewarding if God has called you to do this. But it is hard. I think, at least in the self-publishing arena, and probably the traditional publishing arena too, at least from what the little bit that I've experienced, is that it is oversaturated a lot with authors who are, well, like in nonfiction. I know this is kind of a problem. Some and I mean, I get emails about this all the time too. Like there will be the next up and coming author, or he thinks he is, and he's got his own pet theory about how some prophetic thing is going to play out, or some interpretation of the Bible, and he's written it, but now he wants to hand that off to somebody else and just let them do all of the work, and then they just want to reap all the rewards. Yeah. Even in traditional publishing, it doesn't work like that. No. You got to really take the time. Like for me, and it's going to be different for everybody, like you said, Parker, but for me, going the self-publishing route to start off with was the way to go, because there were a lot of mistakes that I made during self-publishing that, had I made with traditional publishing, it could have ruined my career before it got a chance to get started. So there's a huge learning curve, and with self-publishing, it gives you the chance to kind of iron all that out and work it all out. Also, there are people that are willing to help, but like you said, you gotta do the work. You gotta create your own audience. You gotta take time. And it doesn't always have to take a lot of time. I started this maybe 3 years ago, and I'm already working at Skywatch TV and about to publish a book with Tom Horn through Defender Publishing. So it is possible that this stuff can happen relatively quick if you put the time and the work into it that it takes. No one's going to hand you this stuff.
And that is so important though, Josh, because nowadays there's an entitlement attitude the younger generation has.
Yeah.
I did a post recently on Grace and Faith for You blog, and I talked about crowdfunding sites and authors. Now, mind you, if there are authors out there who have used crowdfunding sites, more power to you, okay? But I just have a huge problem with people who want to write saying, give me money so I can become a writer. It's like, I work, I have a regular job, I do my shows, I write my books, I try to do my speaking engagements, I try to do my marketing. You have to work for this stuff. I mean, and I have problems with people saying, give me money so I can become a full-time writer. Okay, you work hard and you become a full-time writer. And one lady even said, do you want me to buy your book or fund your career? Which one is it? Because I'm not going to give you both, okay? And she made absolute sense to me. Now, mind you, some authors have succeeded, but a lot of times they succeed with collaboratives. Like they may have an anthology or something they're trying to promote and get more. I'm fine with that. But when it comes to people using crowdfunding sites for costs like editing, do you need that coffee in the morning? Do you need to go to McDonald's every day? Do you need to go to the movies every weekend? I mean, come on. There's stuff you can do on your own. There's an entitlement attitude that has crept into our society where just give it to me because I'm Parker. Look how beautiful I am. Give it to me. And I don't like that attitude. Maybe because I've come from that time-old tradition of the starving artist making sacrifices, working through that. And any listeners listening here or viewers watching this, anything you want cost time and effort. It may not cost money because you can do all things on your own, but anything you want costs time and effort. And don't sell yourself short when you do that. If the Lord gave you this idea, he will give you the sweat equity you need to complete it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really good too because it teaches humility. Because again, that entitlement attitude just does not work in if you want a writing career or writing ministry or anything with writing. Another good suggestion is what you and I both have done, and I think that this has helped out a lot of people. Is if somebody wants to write a book and or is writing a book or wants to help get promoted, networking is such a big a big help in that. And one way that you and I both have done this, and a few others out there have too, is if you start a show, start a podcast. If you have any interest in talking, or you don't even. When I first started, I wanted nothing to do with podcasting, or I didn't want to host my own show. That just sounded. It just wasn't at all me. I'm actually really introverted by nature, so that was the last thing I wanted to do. But I'm really glad that God kept pushing me to do it because it has opened so many doors. You can you have other authors on your show. Most of them will do it, and even bigger name ones in the field. Most of them will do it and help you out. You have them on your show, you promote their book, but what that does is it creates a relationship that you can keep up on, email them, don't bombard them with emails all the time, but, every couple months have them back on, do that with a few authors and expand out. And then eventually you'll be able to find times during the show where you can talk a little bit about your own thing, like, oh, that's interesting. I wrote something similar in my book, and it helps keep the conversation going, but it's also a great way to help promote your own stuff with the help of somebody else. What you said about blurbs too, that's really important. My very first book, I was a completely unknown author, but I had L.A. Marzulli give me a blurb for disclosure, and that happened because I was thinking, how can I best network with some of these authors who are already there, who've already made it, and they're doing good. And I thought, well, if I could get one of them to write my foreword, that would probably help. So he was the first person I approached, but at the time he was too busy, and the book he was writing at the time was really similar to mine. So we, he didn't want to have anybody think I was stealing his stuff or he was stealing my stuff. But he offered to write me a blurb, which before then was something I had never even thought that I would need, or I never dealt with that. So but it did help a lot. It helps add a lot of credibility. Also, what I do in Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots and my new book and probably every other book, I include interviews from other experts in the field. Like Quantum Creation, I have Ken Johnson, not the there's a Ken Johnson in this field that does Bible prophecy stuff. I do have an interview with him too, but Kenneth Johnson, the actual creator of that show V, remember V and Alienation?
Yes, I remember V. Who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. V and Alien Nation. I think he did Bionic Woman.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, he was really easy to get a hold of, and he agreed to do an interview for my book, so I put that in there. That's helped. And then Ronald Mallet, he's a Christian, but he's also a professor and theoretical physicist. He works with time travel stuff and black holes. Really interesting guy. He gave me an interview too. Those can be good selling points, and they can help give you credibility, because this is something that actually Derek Gilbert, a coworker of mine now and colleague, but at the time, he really opened my eyes to this. When you're first starting out, nobody knows you, so why should they care?
Yes.
And not to be like mean about it or anything, but if I have $20 to spend on a book, am I going to take a chance on some unknown author that who knows, and I can't find anything online about them? They don't have a website, they don't have a show, they don't have any way for me to get to know that person and what their theology is? Mm-hmm. Or do I want to spend it on what's going to be a safe bet, say like an L.A. Marzulli book or a Tom Horn book, or something where I know what I'm getting, I know that I like that, and it's gonna be beneficial to me. So it's all about doing what you can to get your audience to know you, and shows and interviews and all that stuff can really help.
It's interesting because that's very important, especially from a nonfiction standpoint. You do need that credibility, because why do I want to hear everything Josh Peck has to say?
Exactly.
But here's the thing: what's so funny with Josh is that Josh, when I was getting my show together, I had never thought I would do that. Not because I didn't want to do it; it just was never on my scope of things I would ever do, which would be have an online broadcasting company. That was never something I thought I would do, but it's here now, and it's going further, and Lord's gonna take it further. And so, if you don't want to do what we do, like we talk to people all the time, I have no problem talking to strangers and stuff like that, no problem. But let's say you'd like to write. Blog. Blogging is a very good way to get stuff out there. Now, people say, how many times should you blog? I would say be consistent. If you blog once a month, blog once a month. I know a good friend of mine, he's a scientist who's also a young earth creationist, and he blogs once a month. And he has archives from 3 or 4 years ago. And as long as you blog once a month, the people can expect it on the 15th of every month, you're going to have a blog, okay? You want to blog twice a week. Make sure you're consistent. If you want to blog 3 times a week, make sure it's consistent. I think you should keep it a couple of times a week to give people time to. I don't think you should do it every single day. That's me, unless you're blogging for like bigger blog sites, like people who like advertise and stuff like that. But for like a personal blog, 2 or 3 times a week. I think that's your sweet spot, because then you have people who have a chance to get it out there. You can share it on your social media and stuff like that. Utilize social media.
Yes.
And a lot of authors, it's so time consuming. Yeah. Social media is time consuming. But I'm able to be flexible with it because I like social media. But some people, they hate it. They're like, oh my gosh, I gotta go to Tumblr, I gotta go to LinkedIn, I gotta go to Twitter, I gotta go to Facebook, I gotta go to Snapchat, I gotta go to Periscope, I gotta go here, gotta pin. It's so many of them. What I would suggest, pick 2. Pick 2 and work those 2. You don't have to be on all of them. Okay, pick 2 and work those 2. My blog is connected to 5 of my social media sites, and automatically does that. And so that's the way of doing it. But if you don't want to do all that, pick 1, pick 2, utilize social media, join groups on social media, on Facebook, Google Plus. I had a poet on my show, Josh, and he's very active on his social media. He's an older gentleman, very active on social media, and he has all poets. Okay, all poets, they have all kind of stuff, and he does it basically through Google Plus. His main platform is Google Plus, so that's what you can do. So Josh has started a show, connect with well-knowns if you can, but you got to do something to get it out there. And then if you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to look at people, then do blogging. So work your social media network. Be able to give something of yourself. And the other thing I would say, Josh, I know you agree, give something without expecting to get something back from people.
Yes.
Like, for example, Josh, when he came into my show, I did not expect him to read my book, for example. Okay, I'm just using it for example. If he did, great. If he didn't, that's still great. We helped each other out. I had him on my show. He got a chance to talk about his book. Okay. Now, some people, and this is a personal belief of mine, I would never charge anyone to be on my show. I would never charge it to be. I think it's ridiculous to do that because you're helping me. You're helping each other. So this is why the networking thing matters. Me and Josh network all the time offline. I may not be on a show often, but we always network. And I say, hey, Josh, can I put this on your page? Yeah, sure, whatever. Hey, Parker, can you do this? Yeah, sure, whatever. It's no problem. And so that's how you build these relationships with authors. There are 7 billion people in the world, Josh. Chances are they're not going to all like me. They're not going to all like you. Chances are. And so it's okay to network. We are colleagues.
That's
Two different
right.
fields, but we're still colleagues. And so I say that because in Christian publishing, sometimes, I'm sorry, not just Christian publishing in general, people get kind of cutthroat. Something I found out recently, they get kind of cutthroat. They'll put, like, I've seen authors read someone's book or just go to someone else's book and say, oh, this book wasn't a really good book, but if you want to read a great book, read my book. And you kind of going like, really? That's like a preacher is preaching and another preacher come and takes his microphone and start preaching his sermon. You're like, excuse me. We don't have to be that way. If you want to preach, the next time you get a chance to preach, And so those are the things I want to tell our listeners out there because it's important. It's getting bigger, especially Christian spec fiction is getting bigger. And if God's called you to write a speculative fiction book, do that. I do want to make one note, Josh. I don't know how much time we have, but I do want to make one note.
Go for it.
Authors who don't want to write Christian speculative fiction, who don't want to write Christian books, and you're a Christian, but you don't want to write Christian stories. I'm going to be honest with you about something. I think you're fine. I think if you're not dishonoring the Lord, if you're not trying to be weird or anything like that, I think you're fine. Because there are some Christians who just want to tell a good story. I know one Christian author, she wrote a series about a werewolf, and he was a time somebody, I don't know, but it was very convoluted. Great story, very convoluted. And she's a Christian, but she said, I don't want to write Christian stories. I want to write clean fiction. That was her thing. I want to write clean fiction and reach different genres. Go right ahead. I think that's good. And there was one Christian lady on my show. I don't know if you even saw it, Josh. She used to write erotica. And she became a Christian over time through her erotica career. She became a Christian over time. And because the saints in her area did not hound her, did not pressure her, say, well, you should be writing erotica. They just say, well, I just won't read your story. I'm not into erotica. Do you know the Lord worked in her life and now she's starting to write Christian romances. She went from writing erotica to writing Christian romances. Okay.
It's amazing.
It's amazing what you let the Spirit do. Always, because sometimes you can get very legalistic. You shouldn't do this. And I'm not going to put that on anybody, okay? Even people who read erotica, I'm not going to say your faith is lost. I'm not going to say that. You just read something. But if the Lord gives you this gift, use it for Him. Or be honoring to Him. You can still honor the Lord, even if you're not, let's say, writing Christian fiction. And I just want to let people know that, because there may be someone listening saying, well, I don't want to write Christian stories. I just want to write a good story. Go right ahead. I think go right ahead. As long as you don't try to dishonor the Lord or try to make Him less than what He is, because He can't be less than what He is no matter what you try to do. He's not going to be less than what He is. But that's just something I want people to know in case someone's listening and saying, well, I'm a Christian, but I want to write XYZ story. I think you should. That's my personal opinion. Please do as the Lord leads you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned before, doing this kind of work will definitely make you humble if you're open to it. Anybody who wants to write and do that, be teachable, take people's advice, when you're first starting off on any job or ministry or whatever, you're not going to know everything, and nobody really expects you to. But if you're not teachable, no one's going to want to work with you. There are, when I first started out, I didn't know anything, but I was blessed enough that there were quite a few well-known and established authors that were more than happy to help me out. But it was because they were gracious enough to do it, but also because I didn't hound them about it every day, because they have jobs and lives too. But also I was teachable. I took all the advice that I was given, and it's really, really helped. So it's good to have humility and take advice and take criticism.
Yes, that is so hard for new authors.
Yeah.
Josh, when I first got my first poor review, I was out for 4 days. Okay. Yep. I was out. I didn't think I could write ever again. Mountain Dew was my friend. Marshmallows were my friend. I binged because I was like, I'm not a good author. Look at this person believes it. Oh my gosh. But what happens is that over time, as you get more seasoned, you start to say, okay, is this a critical review helpful? Or is it something I can use? One lady mentioned in one of my critical reviews, she said, she gave some advice about how to write certain things better. Another gentleman, he contacted me and he gave me some advice about my voice, how to use my voice. At some points in the story, I used active voice, and other parts of my story I used passive voice. So I took that information and made it better for the next book. Most people liked it. I will say most people did like the story. I won't lie. But people who were critical, they're helping you. People who are critical in a good way, they're helping you. Now, one person said, "Oh, this book was stupid." Well, that doesn't really help you because it's so subjective, okay? But if you get critical advice, be okay with that. Take the critical advice, use it to make yourself better. Because if you're going to write Christian speculative fiction stories that are going to honor God, that are going to honor God or honor the faith somehow, you want to do it as well as possible. Do your best work. And don't let the errors that may crop out. Let's say you miss an error or two. Don't let that freak you out. We're not perfect. I'm trying to get there, but we're not perfect. We don't want to be perfect till we get to heaven. So definitely take that with you as well. I hope we're not bombarding people with all this advice, but it's such a big industry, publishing, and there are so many going into it. Some people think they're going to go into it for the money. What would you say to that, Josh? We just both it's unless you're a huge author. I honestly feel this is a ministry. My writing career is a ministry. I'll never forget, Josh, a woman contacted me recently. She read Many Strange Women. She said that your book got me to praying. She said, I do more than just pray. She said, I had to do more than pray. I have to read my Bible. And I had never expected to hear that. She said, your book was just so good. And it taught me that I pray a lot, but I don't read my Bible. So you got to read the word. You got to eat the word because how you going to know about the Lord if you don't read about him, And that was someone who read Many Strange Women, which is a romance story. Mind you, it's a romance story. And I was talking about self-hatred. She got something else from it because she writing as a ministry. In my other book, The Other Man, I talk about a very difficult topic, and I'm very realistic with it. And go through the various nuances of a relationship that may be teetering on whether or not this person does this. And there are people who deal with that right now. If the Lord uses that book to stop someone from doing something they shouldn't be doing, the Lord gets praise for that. So that's why I say as a ministry, but you definitely want to do as the Lord lead you.
Amen. Yeah, I could not agree more. I love having these conversations because when I was first starting out, there probably was stuff, but I didn't really know to look for it. A show like this, I think, would have really helped me out to be able to get all this, advice from people who have made it and have shown that we at least sort of know what we're talking about. We've had some success, and anybody that is doing this thinking that it's a good way to make money or they're doing it for the money. Yeah, get out. It's not.
Run while you can.
You will be you will be in poverty. You're going to be so poor you didn't know that amount of poorness was even possible. But if this is what God has called you to do, He will get you through that. I can't even count. When I first started, I can't even count how many times Christina and we almost lost our house, our car. All of that would have happened anyway. It wasn't the writing that caused that. That was that's just life. But the writing and not selling books, that certainly didn't help. Yeah. But it can lead somewhere, and God, you never know how God's gonna use that. So it's definitely not something to be afraid of. It's something that if God's calling you to do it, you step out in faith and you do it. Exactly. Wow. Well, I guess that answers the 2 viewer questions.
And we always get to talking because we always enjoy each other's company when we get a chance to talk. And I always have Josh on my show. My favorite show to this date and is his show that he did called The Fourth Dimension. And I love that show. I've listened to it a couple of times because it's so spirit-filled and just so many things that you learn from that show. And my listeners were like, wow, I never even thought about thinking that this supposedly far out topic would have anything to do with God.
Yeah.
And see, that's what Christian speculative fiction does. It bridges these, so they make it more like, oh, this is something that has nothing to do with God. And everything has to do with the Lord. He is the author of everything. In my books, I always say to the author and finisher of my faith. There's a reason for that. He's the creator. He's going to end it. Anyway, so when we did that, with sci-fi, like multiverses and parallel universes and different dimensions, all that kind of stuff, people think, what does that have to do with God? Everything. There is one gentleman, his name is Max Andrews. I think he's one of the foremost people on the planet who has the theological constructs of a multiverse. And when he talks about it, At first I was like, you are out of your mind, you know, when I first heard it. But then I got to thinking, wait a minute, if we did have multiverse and we could view and see, God would still get the glory because he created everything. And so these what if stories about multiverse and parallel universe and extra dimensions and aliens and all kind of time travel and all kind of stuff falls under Christian speculative fiction. What if this? What if that? And if God is titillating you with that idea, go ahead and write it. I know Josh will be able to help you with some aspects of it. I'll be more than happy to have you on my show to talk about it. You know, we're here for that. We're totally here for that. That's why the Christian speculative fiction is rising, because these abstract topics are being shown to point more and more toward God. For example, Josh, and then I don't know how much time we have left. For example, the cell. The human cell was once thought to be just a blob of gelatinous mucus. Now we're finding it's a universe. The cell is a universe. That's the kind of God we serve, okay? We think this is the really important stuff, and the little cells that happen, we lose millions of cells every day, okay? And we still function. And it's like, this is the universe. We have to see it through the microscope. That's the power of our Lord, and we can explore that facet of him in so many different ways via the vehicle of Christian speculative fiction.
Amen. I couldn't agree with you more. That's why I love quantum physics so much, because to a quark, a cell is literally the size of our universe, if not bigger. It's amazing to think about. That is the end of the viewer questions, and just again for the audience, if you want the chance to send in viewer questions to future guests, you can do so at the Sharpening Report Facebook group, which you can just find on Facebook, or you can go to sharpeningreport.com, and there's a link there. So feel free to join. I'm happy to have you, as long as you don't have a spammy account or something that's not even a real person, because we get that a lot. Also with there are if there's any problems in the group or something, I don't moderate the group. Actually, my good friend Doc Marquis moderates it. So if you have any issues in the group or whatever, tag him or write him. He'll take care of it. I don't have time to moderate it anymore. So I'm not the guy. All right. Well, if people want to find out more about you, order your books, check out your show, where can they go? Where is everything Parker J. Cole online?
Just go to my website, parkerjcole.com. I have everything on there, links to my show, because my show is via Blog Talk Radio, so my show is via there. I host Tuesdays authors, Saturdays we do commentary on things in the church. Like this week, actually in like an hour or so, I'll be doing a show called Fire Breathing Christian, and so that's going to be fun. So that's Tuesdays and Saturdays for me. Deborah's show under the PJC Media umbrella. Her show is Sundays at 2:30 p.m. We love your support. Call in. We like to take listener call-ins and stuff like that. If you want to find anything about me, you can always email me at Parker at parkerjcole.com. But everything is on my site, parkerjcole.com.
Fantastic, man. We have talked about a lot of great important topics. I think I love doing shows like this that kind of step outside of the norm. You know, I don't want to be. I love Bible prophecy. I absolutely love it. I think it is so interesting, but there's other things in the world too. There's other things in the church. Yes. And I love doing a show like this because I think that it could really help people out there that might want to think about starting a writing career or a ministry of some, even an online ministry. YouTube, I don't want to get on this whole thing, but YouTube is another really important outlet that can help a lot of people in a lot of ways. It certainly helped me. So if you had to wrap up all of what we talked about into one final thought, what would you want the audience most to take away from this interview?
I thought about that as you were asking me. And I think the one thing I want our audience to take from everything is that God will give you what you need to do his work. He will give you the talents. He will give you the gifts. He will give you the strength. And to illustrate that, I had an author from England on my show about a couple weeks ago. Her show's going to air in a few weeks. She wrote a book called Eden Undone, and it's a what-if story of what if Eve said no. And so it's a fantastical story. We know it didn't happen, but it's a fantastical story. And she said she was taking care of her mom at the time. And she would be so weak she could barely climb up the stairs, get to her room. And then she said when this idea came to her, she said, I felt like God poured his strength into her. poured his strength into her. And every time she would write for like a couple hours at night. She finished the book. Then she said she published it. Someone loved her book so much they made and created a European American tour for her book here. They paid for her to come here and tour her book. Someone who was of the Islamic faith who read her book and became a Christian probably
Wow.
through that. Now I don't know if it's strictly through her book, but just her book helped them, led them to become a Christian. God will give you what you need to do this. Those what if questions have answers to God. They may not have the answers, but they have them for God. And God's going to give you what you need to do this. So don't worry if you can do it. Just ask the Lord to give you the strength to do it. If you want to write Christian speculative fiction, go right ahead. I'm here to help you.
Thank you so much, Parker. This has been such a good show, as it always is every time we talk. And I know you've only been on my show once, but I've been on your show plenty of times, and we always have such good
Oh, yeah.
conversations.
Well, you're cooler than me, Josh. That's
No,
why.
I don't think
You're
so.
cooler than me.
I don't think that's it. I don't think there's a whole lot of people that would look at Josh Peck and think, man, that guy is cool. Maybe fellow nerds like myself would. But
nerds are in style nowadays. That's what's
they're
happening.
great.
Nerds are in
Yeah.
style.
They're great. I love them. Oh, man. Well, unfortunately, we are all out of time, but we're definitely going to have to do this again. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. As always, a great show, and like I said, we'll have you back on.
Oh yeah, I would love to come back on, Josh, and we got to get together, get your stuff on there too, because I know I want to showcase Cherubit. So I'm so glad you had me on the show today.
Anytime. Well, hang on the line. I'll close this out here. That again was Parker J. Cole talking about the rise of Christian speculative fiction. Make sure to check out Parker's materials. You're not going to be disappointed. If you would like to find more episodes of the Sharpening Report, you can do so at sharpeningreport.com and my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JoshPeckDisclosure. Also, if you care to help support the show and this ministry, you can do so at sharpeningreport.com. Your donations go to the everyday running of the ministry and help bring you more episodes of the Sharpening Report, as well as more books and other materials. And I'll say, as I do in every show, please only donate if you feel God leading you to do so. If you're not sure, or if you don't feel led, that's totally fine. It is not an obligation. You can always pray for us. We can always use more prayer. We're not 501c3, so your donations aren't tax deductible, and I'm never going to be the kind of person that's going to promise extra blessings from God or a miraculous tenfold return on your money or anything like that. We're not in the business of making promises for God, but what I can promise is that your help, be it prayer or financial, it's greatly appreciated, keeps us going, and is the only reason we're able to continue doing what we do. So all of that being said, we are all out of time, and I want to thank you so much for tuning into the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck, and as always, take care, and God bless.